All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the. Tonight we're talking to Mr. Michael Dowden from Indianapolis, Indiana, or the area that are around. Michael's going to be our speaker for the July edition of the Memphis Python user group. Michael, how are you doing tonight?
Doing awesome. Thanks for talking with me this evening.
Well, thank you. Thank you for speaking. The talk that you are doing, let's go ahead and talk about that real quick. And from horror story to fairy tale, writing code people want to read. Now, I first saw this talk, I think it was 2021 Scenic City Summit. That was the virtual.
Yeah, that would make sense.
And
Right.
I was monitoring the room that you are the track or room or whatever that you were in. And I really, and I saw this title and I really didn't think so much of it. And it is one of the most insightful talks I've really ever seen. I never would have thought that a spell checker would actually be of use in a code editor. So tell us a little bit about the talk and why, where did you come up with this?
So this talk has taken many forms. I've given it a number of times, and it's related to other similar talks that I've done. So this is kind of the culmination of like 2 or 3 attempts to put this together. And the initial premise was I did a talk about naming and how naming is kind of important and why it's important and why it's hard. And then I started incorporating more and more pieces of code quality, because I wanted to do a code quality talk, but I didn't want to do a code quality talk like so often is. I wanted to completely separate myself and my opinion from what I like to see and what I want to see versus what can be more measurably shown to be good or bad. And so the content of the talk comes a lot from my experience as a consultant, trying to move between teams and picking up new projects really quickly and running into some of the challenges that I've run into while doing that. But also it comes from working with junior developers and mentoring junior developers and seeing kind of where they struggle when they're joining a team or getting into development for the first time. And so I tried to take some of the things that I've learned from that and put it into a talk about how we can do better and do it in a way, hopefully, that is entertaining and informative.
So, not to steal a whole lot of thunder from the talk, what are kind of like the biggest surprise that people are usually take away from this? I mean, I may have already given it away, but
No. I don't. I think that one of the biggest surprises is that the way you put together Boolean expressions is actually important.
Okay.
Because we have a really hard time with too many negations, right? So every time, and this is something I touch on the talk, but every time you negate a statement, it takes cognitive effort to detangle that.
Right.
So if I say, I'm not going to avoid going to the store, what does that mean? So avoid is a negation. So I need to, so I'm avoiding the store. So I'm not going to the store. I'm not going to avoid. Oh, it means I maybe will go to the store. Like, right. And so it seems really clear, but it turns out that it takes us cycles to untangle what that is. So it's much better to say something along the lines of, I am going to the store, or I would consider going to the store, or something stated as a positive is much easier for us to understand.
So now, even though you're making this code easier to read, or even code that people want to read, now do people come away from this and say, oh, well, great, now I don't have to document my code, or not document it as much, or have you ever gotten a reaction like that?
No, and I actually touch on that specifically because there is certainly, we see that Twitter's a wonderful place, but sometimes the conversations that happen out in the online space tend to lack nuance.
Right.
And so we've seen some of these fights. Well, really, if your code's any good, you wouldn't need documentation. Versus, if you write good documentation, it doesn't matter what your code looks like. And I think the truth is somewhere in between those two
Right.
extremes, right? We definitely want to be able to look at the code and understand it, but part of the secret is making sure that the documentation we're writing, or the documentation or the comments that we're writing around that code, aren't repetitive or redundant. And I'm a firm believer in documentation. I love documentation, but it needs to be super simple and concise, because bad documentation is worse than no documentation, because it
Right.
can lead you like it fills you with the confidence to go in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I had a friend who gave me a T-shirt once who said if you were supposed to understand it, we wouldn't call it code. You know?
Nice. I like it.
Right. So the talk is going to be on July 17th, 2023, 6 p.m. Central Time. So thanks for staying up an hour later, Mike, for us.
Absolutely.
You can RSVP at bit.ly /mempi-july-23. And this will be virtual, to be via Teams. So be sure to sign up. So you're telling me a little bit before we came online that you have a project here on Kickstarter. So tell us a little bit about that, because this is a little bit outside of the technical realm.
Yeah, it is. So I'm working with Andromeda Galactic Solutions, Martin's consulting company, and one of my good college buddies, we've been friends for well over 25 years now, came up with this idea for a tool to help with tabletop role-playing games. And so he's a game master for things like D&D, Pathfinder, and a variety of other role-playing games. And that's something that he and I have shared in common, and a bunch of our friends, for a number of years. So we've been playing role-playing games together for, basically as long as we've known each other. And so he had the idea for this digital tool that would hopefully make it easier for game masters to plan and prepare, because it's a lot of work to run a game for a group of people. And so we wanted to improve that experience. And so I think we've come up with something that we can be really proud of. And last week, we spent the week at Origins Game Fair in Columbus, Ohio. We had a booth there, and we're doing demos and kind of showing off Laurelink, which is the product on Kickstarter, and launched the Kickstarter that week. And we got just fantastic feedback from people, and we're looking to collect even more feedback so that we can make it as good as possible. So
awesome. So in other words, this is not a game itself, but it's it's a tool to support. It's a tool to support.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah, because there's just a lot of pieces that go into. I mean, role playing is effectively you're creating fiction, and whether you're taking somebody else's adventure and you're making it your own and running it for your group, or coming up with something completely on your own, you're really going through the act of storytelling. And there's a lot of pieces to putting a story together and tracking what happens, and it's a lot more enjoyable when it's easy to do the preparation work, but also to sit down at the table across from your friends and be able to quickly find the information you need to tell the next step of the story, as opposed to kind of stumbling with it. And then sometimes you come up with characters or stories or situations or scenarios on the fly, and you want to make a note of it, right? Because you might want to come back to that later, or you might want to remember what you came up with because it was really cool, or maybe you created this brand new town, and now the players are going to want to come back to that town again. And so you need to be able to create those things on the fly and track that as you're kind of going through the storytelling experience.
Right. So cool. So you mentioned your wife Martine. You've also collaborated with her on some authoring projects on some books, haven't you?
Yes, absolutely. So together we've written three books, and on CSS, accessibility, and then a children's book
Yeah,
on programming languages.
That's what I was referring to. That one, really, I'm still kind of miffed that P was Perl and not Python, but
well, but at least we got the Python in there in the illustration.
There you go. But yeah, tell us a little bit more about that book. Because that's an interesting book. What are you trying to do, and where did you come up with the concept for that and everything?
So we came up with the concept. Somebody gave us a children's book on HTML or something when my son was born, and I'm like, "This is a cool concept, but I want to do this for programming. We need something like this for programming languages, and I want it to be syntactically correct so that you could literally." I'm like, "I'm a geek. I want to be able to take what's in the book and actually run it
Right.
because that's cool." And so we came up with this idea. It was I have a list of ideas, right? I maintain this huge list, and every once in a while, I'll decide to pick one of them up and work on it. And so I did that one weekend. I'm like, I've got time. I want to work on this. Ironically, and this is hilarious, I finally sat down to work on it in the car on a ride to Origins Game Fair in Columbus, Ohio. In I guess it would have been 2014, which is where I just came back from last week, so that's funny. Right. And finished writing the first draft, and the first draft was basically me coming up with what are the languages going to be, what's the format going to be, A through Z, coming up with some details. And I'm like, I'm really happy with this. Like, it's basic, it's really simple, but I'm happy with this. So we show up there and talk to Alex Papadumos from Anito. He's also a tech speaker. We've met him from a tech conference. Actually, I think I met him at Codepalooza initially. And saw him, said hi. Martine told him about the book that I had just finished drafting. And he's like, "Do you have a publisher yet?" "No." "Would you like to have a publisher?" "Yes." What just happened? That never happens. That never happens. And so
I'm going to go looking for the publisher.
So we connected, had a great con, and came back home and followed up a few weeks later. And he had told me, after kind of going over the idea at the conference, that there was some extra details. I needed to have more detail. I needed to give like the backstory of the languages, or maybe some history, or why it's useful, or whatever. So I had actually already started going through that process. I did a bunch of research on the different languages. I went really in depth. I had already kind of done the Hello World thing, but I went through and tested the Hello Worlds. All the Hello Worlds that are in the book are actually on my GitHub page in a repository out there just for fun.
Now, but you do have one programming language, every letter for A to Z, every single one of them.
A to Z. And the rule was the programming language, it could be a toy or an experimental language so long as it works and runs and is Turing complete. That was the rule.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. So real quick, I want to do a quick plug for our friend Chris Gardner, who runs DevSpace in Huntsville, Alabama. This is the first time since 2019 that it's been in person. So this is going to be it's going to be in late October. I forget the exact dates, but the call for papers, or call for speakers, or whatever you want to call it, is open now through July 15th. So if you go to devspaceconf.com, and you can, and that'll actually, there will be a link on there to the Sessionize page. And it is all in person. In fact, if you go to when you go to submit your talk, it says there's an option there that says I will present my talks in person, and there are two options. One is yes, I understand, or no, and the other one is no, I not wish to submit my talks. So I think he's pretty serious about this being in person. It's a really great time. The space down in Huntsville at the Von Braun Center, connected to the Embassy Suites, where we generally, I assume that's where we'll stay again. But really good for, I know a lot of people who have some first time speakers who have been there, a lot of experienced speakers. Chris always puts on, and it's a reasonably priced conference as well. It's not one of those super high price conferences. So real quick, let's toss your Twitter up on here so people can get in touch with you. It's not Mr. Dowden, it's Mr. Dowden. He doesn't expect everybody to call him Mr. Dowden, to call him Mr. Dowden. But and then also, of course, the RSVP here. So is there anything that you'd like to leave us with tonight, Michael?
Obviously, I would like to see you on July 17th. Look forward to talking.
Right. Exactly. Anything else that you want to leave to entice people to come to the talk? Any more tidbits or anything?
Yes, I will end the talk by giving you some takeaway tips that you can use to actually make your code better on your own team. So there is a takeaway. I promise.
Awesome. Well, go to bit.ly mempi-july-23. Again, it'll be this one is virtual. We do hopefully we'll come back to the Microsoft Office soon. But other than that, Michael, thanks for thanks for spending some time with me this evening, and looking forward to seeing the talk again on the 17th.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Everybody, make sure that you come to the talk, and we will see you on the 17th. See y'all later.